Hi, I'm Chris Fry of MDTS Training. I'm here today at the Greenfield Fishing Game Club, and I'm going to be talking to you about cleaning your AR-15. We all like going out to the range and shooting it, but none of us like cleaning it. So we're gonna go over today some tips and tricks on how to keep this platform clean and ready to roll the next time we want to get out to the range and use it. So starting off with the carbine completely assembled, we have to break it down and we have to separate it into its two components, which is the lower receiver and upper receiver. We have our takedown pins, our rear takedown pin here, which can be visualized right here. Using a fingernail, some type of tool, we want to push that pin out and hook our fingernail on the opposite edge of the takedown pin and pull it all the way out. And then this pin shouldn't come away from the gun. If it does, that's some kind of problem, and you've lost a retention pin in there, and you want to get that looked at by a gunsmith. Once I've pulled this to the extent of its travel, I'm going to simply bring the lower receiver down. Now from here, there's another takedown pin towards the fore end, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to push one end with my fingernail or some type of tool, and now I'm going to hook it with my fingernail and pull that retention pin out. And again, this one shouldn't come all the way out either. Now I simply separate the lower receiver from the upper receiver. Within the upper receiver, we house our bolt and bolt carrier. So I'm going to depress the charging handle release. I'm going to pull the charging handle out, and that allows me to take the bolt carrier and bolt itself right out of the chamber. Now I'm going to simply take the charging handle out, and I'm going to set those two down. We're going to get back to those in a little bit more detail later. So the first thing that I do is I get some type of degreaser, and I'm going to spray that degreaser right into the chamber. And I'm going to spray it all throughout here to the ejection port, and actually I'm going to spray it on the outside of the gun as well. And this degreaser, decarbonizer is real good. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to just wipe all the debris off of it, whatever I can, and clean any dirty spots that I see. In general, I like to use paper towels and items that I can find at a mini mart somewhere, because I want to be able to clean my AR-15 wherever I go. So with some paper towels, now that I've sprayed the degreaser in there, I'm going to let that run down the bore for a second, and I'm going to clean in here with these paper towels, get my finger to get it completely clean. I want to make sure I get nice and deep into that carrier key channel. If I have areas that I can't get to easily with my finger or a tool that I might have with me, then I have to use a little bit more of a specialized tool, such as like maybe a dental pick that I pick up at a gun show somewhere, or some type of nylon brush or brass brush. I can get in here and I can clean that out. So now that I've wiped down the exterior and I've cleaned out that chamber, that area inside the chamber there, now I'm going to start to focus on the actual feed ramps and the chamber and the bore of the gun. And one of the hardest spots to get to is right in the chamber itself and the throat. So some type of tool like this, our cleaning rod from a standard military spec cleaning kit that again we can get at a gun show or online, with this chamber cleaning tool. We've got a little bit of a brush and these bristles here. I'm simply going to go down into the chamber itself in the throat, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to get that brass brush right deep in there, and I'm going to plunge it a couple times as best I can to loosen up any of that debris that's built up there into that chamber. And again, I might use some type of tool like a dental pick if I have to, and get in here and pick out and clean out any buildup that I might have in there. And I might even spray it again and do it a second or third time. It all depends on how meticulous you want to be. If we're looking at a full field strip, where I generally do a full field strip after every 4,000 rounds, then I want to try to be meticulous. And again, we use specialized tools like this dental pick to get in here and chip away any built up carbon or debris and get it right out of there. So now that that chamber is cleared out, now I'm going to use a different tool. If you prefer to use a actual cleaning rod, then you can take a patch and you can run a cleaning rod through the bore itself. I like to utilize a bore snake. I find that they're very convenient. They're easy to carry around in my range bag or my range box. Again, I'm going to put a little bit of that degreaser onto the snake itself, and now using the brass weight at the end, I'm simply going to snake this through the bore. And I always want to go in the direction that the cartridge travels. So I'm going to work from the rear to the front. So I've fed that snake through the front of the bore. Now I get a good grasp on it, and I'm basically going to sit here and I'm going to tug the rest of that snake through that bore. And this has got like bristles built into it, and so it scrapes and it cleans that bore as it goes through. And I might do that 4, 5, 6 times. Then I'll run a white patch through the bore to make sure it's nice and clean. Me personally, I generally don't lubricate the bore, but some people do. They'll take another patch with a cleaning rod and they'll put a very, very small amount of lubricant on there and run that through once. Once we've got our bore cleaned out, I might look up here at my front sight post, my barrel itself and the muzzle, spray that with a little bit of the degreaser, and again, wipe it down good. Get all the dirt and debris. If we're shooting in different positions out in the range and getting into some unusual positions, a lot of dirt and debris get kicked back up into the gun, and that's important that we get that all cleaned away. Now we're going to start looking at the lower receiver. And with the lower receiver, again, we can do a quick and dirty maintenance on this, which would be just cleaning out, making sure we don't have anything stuck or debris down in the trigger group. Once again, tools like this are great for getting down in there and picking any kind of small pieces away. I'm going to utilize my degreaser again and get down in here and wipe all the parts off. Get in there as best I can. I'm going to wipe down the outside of the gun as well as the internal parts. Now, if I want to go in a little bit more detail, this pin right here is our buffer tube retention pin, and I'm going to depress that enough until my buffer tube or buffer spring starts to come out. And I'm going to totally remove my buffer spring, and housed within the buffer spring is my actual buffer. And I separate these two, and with the buffer again, I'm going to degrease it, wipe it down good, make sure it's nice and dry, no black carbon or buildup on it. And once that's all cleaned off, I set that aside. With the buffer spring, I generally just wipe this down. I wipe it down good, make sure that I got all the crap off of it and debris. And now with this, before I place this back into the receiver extension tube, this is where I might take a little bit of lubricant, whichever lubricant you choose to utilize, and I'm going to run that lubricant along that buffer spring, so that when I place it back into that receiver extension, it'll move nice and freely in there as the rifle reciprocates. So once that's together, I reinsert my buffer into the spring, and depressing the buffer spring retention pin, I'm going to reinsert that spring back into my receiver extension. With the trigger group itself, I can drop my hammer forward, get down in behind here, make sure that give it a quick visual inspection, make sure I don't have any cracks. One real big thing that I want to pay attention to is the actual feet of the trigger springs. Making sure both of those springs, there's one on each side, I want to make sure both of those springs are completely intact. A lot of times one of those springs might get broken, and the gun will still operate, but it's not operating to optimum efficiency. So we want to pay close attention to that and get in there and really visually inspect that. And again, today here I don't have a handheld flashlight, but if I'm at home and I'm under some good lighting, that's a lot easier. Now that we have the lower receiver cleaned up a little bit, I'm going to start focusing on a little bit more detail of the guts of the AR-15 platform. To start off with, we've got our charging handle, and just like all the other parts, I want to make sure I degrease it with some degreaser and wipe it down good. Again, removing any carbon buildup, grease, debris, whatever's in there. Use those paper towels and clean that out good. Use a brush, use that dental pick, whatever you got to use. I also find that a good field expedient item to use for cleaning is Q-tips. I can get Q-tips anywhere, and a Q-tip fits perfectly right down there in that trench and fits into a lot of different parts of this firearm. Once I've got that nice and degreased, now before I do anything else with this, I want to put a little bit of lube on what we call the witness marks. And witness marks are anywhere that you see the finish rubbed off of the piece of metal. So what that means by that witness mark is it means that metal's rubbing on metal. And whenever we have metal rubbing on metal, we want to make sure that there's a little bit of lubricant there. So where we see these silverish witness marks are where I'm going to take a very small amount of lubricant and put it on my finger or on my cleaning cloth, and I'm going to lube those spots to make sure that when I reassemble the carbine, I don't have any kind of resistance from that charging handle working properly. And the witness marks can be on both the top and the bottom, so I got to make sure I hit those good. I generally don't want to use an overabundance of lubricant, and we're going to talk more about that once we get to the bolt carrier. One instructor of mine, Greg Sullivan, taught me that you want it to glisten like a glazed donut, which is a good tip. I don't want it to be so lubricated. I don't want any parts on the carbine to be so lubricated that it becomes sticky. And if we're down on the ground and we're shooting, and again, we're in an adverse position, or depending upon the environment we're in, debris gets kicked up into this gun through the ejection port. And if you've got an overabundance of lubricant on the different parts, especially the bolt carrier and bolt, it's going to attract that debris like flies to flypaper. So now we get to the main part here, and this is our bolt carrier. And on top of the bolt carrier, we have our gas key and the bolt itself, which is housed within the bolt carrier, and our firing pin. So to break this apart, again, some type of small tool is handy, like a dental pick. I'm going to take my firing pin, retention pin out here, and pop that pin out. And these are small parts. You want to make sure that you have a little Tupperware dish, or you're doing this somewhere that if you drop this, you can make sure you find it. So I'm going to place that pin over here to the side, right where I know where it is, and now I can remove my firing pin. And let's focus on the firing pin real quickly. You see how dirty that is, the carbon buildup on that, the blackness. Like all the other parts, I want to make sure I spray it down good and wipe that off, get it back to that silver or shiny status that it was when you first got the gun. So with our firing pin nice and cleaned off, we're going to set this aside with our firing pin retention pin. And now we're going to move into the actual bolt and carrier. We have our cam pin here, and in order to remove the bolt from the bolt carrier, we have to turn the cam pin so that it is flush with the gas carrier key here. And now I can remove the cam pin, and again, I'm going to set this over here with my firing pin and my firing pin retention pin. Now I can completely remove the bolt itself from the bolt carrier. Now I'm going to focus on the bolt carrier before I break the bolt down into detail. Like the charging handle, we want to focus on areas that wear a lot and areas that we see wear. And like all the other parts, I'm going to degrease it real good. I want to get inside the actual bolt carrier as well as the outside. Don't get fooled into thinking that that dirt doesn't build up on the inside here. Wipe it down real good with our paper towels. Clean off all that dirt, carbon, and debris as best we can. And one area to really focus on is right in the firing pin channel. So it's kind of hard to see, but if we look right in here where the firing pin actually seats itself, a lot of carbon and debris can build up in there. And again, there's specific tools that can be bought, scrapers that you can get in here with that can scrape that out very rapidly. It all depends on what you wanna utilize. I try to get in here and scrape this out, get any carbon or debris out of there as best I can. It's not something, unless I'm doing a full field strip, if I just want to do a quick cleaning, it's not something I focus heavily upon. But if I'm doing a complete field strip, then I definitely want to clean that out of there. So once that bolt carrier is degreased and we sit here and we clean it off real well, now before I move on to my bolt itself, I want to make sure that this is lubed up properly. Now with the bolt carrier, again, I take a little bit of that lubricant, I put it on the tip of my finger, and I look for those areas that show me those witness marks where the metal rubs on metal. And there's not many areas here on the bolt carrier itself. A lot of people think they just want to spray the whole thing and throw it right into the gun. Well, that's completely unnecessary. It's a waste of your whatever lubricant you're utilizing. And again, it attracts debris. So I lubricate the areas that I see the witness marks on. And that's it. It's good to go. So I set this aside with my firing pin retention pin, and my cam, my charging handle. Now we get to the main part, and this is our bolt itself. And the bolt itself is comprised of different parts here. One real quick thing that we want to pay attention to and look at is our gas rings. And we've got 3 gas rings here towards the front or the tail of the bolt. And we want to look at those gas rings. We want to make sure we have 3 of them to start off with. And number 2, we want to make sure none of them are bent or disfigured in any way. It's important that you don't try to take these off unless one of them is broken. Leave them the way they are. And contrary to popular belief, this firearm will fire and work efficiently with up to only 1 gas ring. So, you know, worst case scenario, you've only got 1 gas ring on there, you don't have extra supplies with you, and you need to shoot for whatever reason, it'll still work. One area to really focus on is right here around the tail. I don't know if you guys can see, but we've got a lot of carbon and debris buildup here around the tail. It's just black. So I'm going to degrease that. Now you can see there, just with a little bit of degreaser, it cleaned the front of the top of the tail, but there's still a lot of carbon buildup here. And you guys can see I've been shooting a lot and not cleaning my gun enough because this tail is really dirty. You guys can see the carbon coming off of there in chunks. And so this is where like a nice brass brush comes in really, really helpful. So I'm going to take one of my brushes here and I'm actually going to, put some elbow grease into this and clean that tail right off as best I can. Get the carbon buildup off there. Again, I wipe it down and it should be nice and shiny. No more carbon buildup. Now that we've got the tail of the bolt cleaned off to our satisfaction, nice and shiny, no more carbon or black buildup, we've inspected our gas rings, we're going to move up here to the bolt face in the front of the bolt itself. On the bolt face, we want to take our dental pick or tool. We want to make sure we don't have any pieces of carbon or debris or pieces of a shell casing stuck down in here, and we want to clean that out. The next thing we want to pay attention to is in between the lugs themselves. We want to take our degreaser and a paper towel or our pick, and we want to clean that out there. Maybe a toothpick again, or a toothpick or a Q-tip fits right in there nicely and does 2 jobs at once. Now that we've inspected that and everything looks good, we're going to remove the extractor. And we have our extractor retention pin right here. And with this tool, I'm going to start to push very slowly that retention pin out. And once I pushed it all the way out, I get a hold of it. I want to make sure I don't lose it. So I'm going to grasp it and I'm going to remove it and I'm going to set it here on the table along with my other small parts. Now I can remove the extractor. And we've got the extractor channel here, and we want to, again, take our pick, our degreaser, clean down in there, get that nice and clean, make sure we don't have any carbon buildup or black down in there. So now we're going to focus on the extractor itself, and we've got this spring at the rear. We want to make sure that spring is intact and it's not gone, and we want to make sure the donut around the spring is intact. A lot of these extractors come from the factory with a blue donut around it, and you can buy an upgrade like this black one. It helps a little bit. As we move forward on the extractor, we look here, and the couple areas we really want to pay attention to is the extractor tooth itself right here. We want to make sure that that tooth doesn't have any chips out of it or cracks, and we want to pay very special close attention to making sure we clean this trench out where the extractor tooth bites onto the shell casing and pulls it out of the chamber. So we take our tool, our degreaser, we spray that, we chip and scrape all the debris out of there as best we can and clean that nice and smooth. So I might degrease it, wipe it down, get it nice and shiny again. Make sure there's no black carbon buildup. Another area of importance that we want to pay attention to is we want to look at where the extractor retention pin goes through, and these little here, we want to make sure that's not cracked at all. a lot of times, sometimes a little fracture will occur right here, and that can eventually lead to full breakage, and then you've got a broken extractor on the gun. So again, give a quick visual inspection, make sure these aren't cracked. That's a very, very small piece there, and it's something that can occur, and I've seen happen before. So once we've degreased this and cleaned out that extractor claw tooth there, we set this aside. And with the remainder of the bolt, again, we want to take a little bit of degreaser. We want to spray right down in there and clean it out as best we can. So now that we've got all the different parts of the bolt cleaned off and taken care of, we're going to reassemble it. So now I'm going to reinsert my extractor into the bolt, and as you'll notice, the extractor is not flush with the rest of the bolt, so that's because of the spring towards the rear. So with my thumb, I'm going to press down on that, and now I'm going to take that extractor retention pin, I'm going to insert it, and I'm going to push it all the way through. And I want to make sure that pin is flush with the sides. It's not sticking out one side or the other. So now my extractor's back onto the bolt itself. We've got our bolt face, and we don't want to lubricate the bolt face. We just make sure it's nice and clean. And now I'm going to insert the bolt itself back into the bolt carrier. And a couple tips for this: we want to make sure that the extractor tooth right here is high and left. So facing the camera here, for me, it would be high and right, okay? But if I'm looking at it myself, I would want that tooth high and left. Okay, so I make sure it's high and left because, as you can see here, the channel which the cam pin goes through, the cam pin will insert easily into this channel, which is throated out. But on this side of the bolt, that cam pin channel isn't throated, and so it won't go in. So that's why we want to make sure when we reinsert the bolt itself into the bolt carrier that that tooth is high left. So with that high left, now that channel will line up perfectly. I reinsert my cam pin into that channel once I get it. And I want to make sure I turn my cam pin so that it's now perpendicular to my gas key. And to give it a quick test, I'm going to give it a pull on that bolt itself and make sure that that moves freely in there. We never want to lubricate the bolt face itself. If we lubricate the bolt face and the gun's shot, 500-600 rounds, all that debris and carbon that builds up will build up on the bolt face, and it can cause malfunctions such as failure to unlock and other problems that we just don't want to experience. So now that I've got my bolt inserted into my bolt carrier and seated with the cam pin, it's very, very important that this cam pin is perpendicular to that gas key, because my next step is to insert my firing pin. So I take my firing pin and I put it into the channel here. And I insert it all the way. I make sure it's seated flat. Once it's seated flatly, I take the firing pin retention pin, and now I'm going to put that into the hole. Now a quick test is I want to tap that bolt carrier onto a hard surface to make sure that firing pin doesn't fall all the way out. If your firing pin falls out, then it wasn't inserted all the way before you inserted your retention pin. Another quick test of your gas keys to make sure that those gas keys are in good functioning order is to simply take your pull the bolt all the way out as far as it'll go from the bolt carrier and set it on its face. If the gas keys are kind of weakened or old or bad, then what will happen is this will start to depress in like this. And that's a good indicator that you might need to take a look at those gas rings and replace them. Okay? So now that that's good to go, now we're going to reinsert my bolt carrier and charging handle into the upper receiver. So I get my upper receiver, and I like to hold it with the facing up, chamber facing up here, so that I can see what I'm doing. There's some teeth on the sides of the charging handle here, and those teeth line up nicely with notches inside, again hard to see, inside this upper receiver. But holding this flat, horizontal, I'm going to make sure that the charging handle well here is facing upwards, and I'm going to insert those teeth into the notches and push down. Now I push this forward a little bit. I make sure that my bolt is all the way out from the bolt carrier, and I line up my gas key here with this charging handle well. So now that they're lined up and they're in place, I push it all the way in. So now the upper receiver is fully assembled. If I want to be meticulous, then I want to make sure I close my dust cover up. But now I'm going to reattach my lower receiver with the upper receiver. So I take the lower receiver, make sure that my breakdown pins are out. Now, just like taking it apart, I line those holes up and I push those pins through and make sure it's fully seated all the way through. Line those holes up, push that retention pin, that breakdown pin all the way through. Now it's fully assembled. And with it fully assembled, I want to do a quick, I want to reciprocate that bolt and carry it a couple times to make sure that moves nice and freely. And again, I don't want this bolt dripping. I want this bolt carrier, you know, nice and shiny, but not dripping with lubricant. Once that's done, I want to make sure that my safety works, and making sure I have a safe and clear gun. I'm going to visually and physically inspect that gun has no round no magazine in the magazine and no round in the chamber. I visually and physically 2 or 3 times check and make sure that there's no ammunition in this firearm. I'm going to drop my bolt forward, work my safety selector to make sure my safety selector works, and I'm going to test fire this. So I'm going to, if I'm indoors, I visually and physically make sure this gun is safe and clear and there's no live ammo anywhere near my cleaning area. I'm going to point this, I want to get into an area where I'm pointing this at a concrete wall, somewhere safe, maybe where 2 walls come together, the edge of where 2 walls come together. And if I'm upstairs, I maybe want to go down to the basement. I don't ever want to do this while I'm upstairs and there might be people below me, but I point this into a safe direction where I know that if I did mess up, that round's going hopefully into a safe direction. My safety goes off and I do a quick status check to make sure this gun's functioning properly. So I pull the trigger, it's good. I hold the trigger back, I reciprocate the charging handle, let my trigger out till I feel the reset, safety goes back on, I'm good to go. So once again, it's great going out in the range and shooting your AR-15, but like all things, when we play with them, then we got to take some time and we got to make sure that they're maintained properly. So we want to go out and we want to shoot them again, or in the worst case scenario, you might have to utilize one of these firearms for personal protection. We want to make sure it's ready and up functioning. So keeping it maintained, keeping it clean is of the utmost importance. Now that you've got your AR-15 clean, get out to that range and get it dirty again. If you need to locate a range in your area, go to NSSF's website, wheretoshoot.org.